The woman was touching her hand to the crumbling brick wall, her fingers trembling as she looked on with sorrow. This was their cafe, where Anna Kowalski and Stefan Nowak had spent hours together. The place where they first kissed. Now just a pile of rubble, 3 streets away, not too far, a man was sifting through the ruins of a destroyed bookstore. Their bookstore, August 15th, 1945. They had both come, they had both kept their word. They had both survived 6 years of hell. But between them were just a few minutes, a few wrong steps, and this small distance would change the rest of their lives. Because that day, in that chaos, they both searched for each other. They were both there, but they didn't meet, and now they never would. This is the story of Anna Kowalski and Stefan Nowak, and it will show you just how cruel fate can be. You can more or less imagine what Warsaw was like before the war destroyed everything. In 1938, it was a city full of cafes and universities, students filling the streets to overflowing. Łazienki Park, with its Saturday evening concerts, filled with young people who believed their futures were limitless. Anna was 19 years old, a student studying literature at the University of Warsaw, her hair worn in braids, and as Stefan would say, she had libraries in her eyes. Stefan was 21, an architecture student who dreamed of rebuilding Poland's historic buildings, his hands always stained with charcoal from his drawings. They met in October 1938 at a student demonstration. Not a political demonstration, just students demanding better heating in the dormitories. Anna was chanting slogans, her voice rising above the crowd, and the moment Stefan saw her, he thought she was the most alive person there. He drew her there, standing on a bench, her fist in the air, passion radiating from her every movement. When Anna came down, he showed her the drawing. "You've made me look brave," she said, examining the sketch. "I only drew what I saw," Stefan replied. That drawing would bring 6 years of hell with it. Their courtship was brief but intense, as first loves always are when you're young, and the world seems permanent. They had 9 months, walks along the Vistula River, stolen kisses between the shelves of the university library, Stefan teaching Anna about the mathematical beauty in Gothic architecture, Anna reading him Mickiewicz's poetry until he had memorized all the lines. 9 wonderful months filled with beauty. Stefan's family owned a small cafe near the old town. Café Słońce, the Sun Cafe. It had yellow walls and windows that caught the morning light, and Anna would meet him there before her classes. She always ordered the same thing, black coffee and a pączek with rose jam. He would draw while she studied, notebooks full of her bent over her books, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup, her profile as she looked out the window. "When we're old," Stefan said one April morning in 1939, "I'll build you a house with windows just like these, so you'll always have the morning light." "When we're old," Anna repeated, smiling at this assumption. "You're so certain, Pan Nowak. About you, always." But there was a darkness growing over everything. You could feel it in the way people's conversations turned to whispers, in the way Stefan's father began hiding valuables, in the way Anna's mother started stockpiling food. The news from Germany was getting darker every day. In June 1939, Anna told Stefan something she'd been hiding. They were sitting on a bench in the Saxon garden, right among the roses in full bloom, and Anna was crying. "My real name isn't Kowalski," she said. "It's Kowalska. My family changed it 5 years ago, Polonized it, because our real surname is Cohn. Stefan, I'm Jewish. You know what that meant in 1939. Stefan saw the fear in her eyes, saw that she was already bracing herself for him to get up and walk away. Anti-Semitism was growing, becoming more open, more dangerous. Her family had hidden her identity to protect her, to give her a chance at a normal life. Stefan took her hands in his. "Anna Cohn, Anna Kowalski, I don't care what name you use. You're the girl who yells at politicians, who cries over poetry, who makes me want to build beautiful things. That's all that matters." Anna hugged him tight, sobbing with relief. "When the war comes, and it's coming, Stefan, everyone knows it's coming, we might be separated. Promise me something, anything. Promise that when it's over, no matter what, we'll meet again, right here, in this garden, on this bench." August 15th, the anniversary of the day we met at that stupid demonstration. Every year, until we find each other. Stefan pulled out his sketchbook and tore out a page. He drew the bench, the roses, the fountain visible in the background. He marked an X on it. August 15th, Saxon garden. "This bench, I promise." Anna took the drawing and pressed it to her heart. "I promise too." 3 months later, on September 1st, 1939, German bombs fell on Warsaw. Within weeks, the occupation began, and within months, the ghetto walls rose. Anna's family was forced inside. Stefan saw Anna one last time before the walls closed, through a gap during construction while workers were still laying bricks. He called out her name. She turned, saw him, and pressed her hand to the gap. He pressed his hand to hers, only a few centimeters of empty air between them. August 15th. He called out, "Saxon garden. I'll be there," she promised. "Every year. I'll wait every year." Then a guard shouted, and Anna pulled back, and the bricks filled the gap, and she was gone. You need to understand what Stefan went through to keep this promise. He joined the Polish underground, the Home Army, not especially because he was political, but because they needed his architectural knowledge. He could map Warsaw's sewers, identify which buildings had reinforced basements, calculate load-bearing walls for hiding refugees. He participated in the 1944 Warsaw Uprising, that hopeless, doomed rebellion. For 63 days, he fought in the ruins of his city, watching the buildings he'd studied and loved turn to rubble. The cafe where he'd drawn Anna was destroyed in the first week. His university turned to dust. The Saxon garden, their meeting place, was devastated. When the uprising failed and the Nazis ordered Warsaw evacuated, Stefan was sent to a labor camp in Germany. But he kept that drawing. Through beatings, through starvation, through watching the friends beside him die, he kept Anna's picture folded against his heart. It became a talisman, a reason to survive. In the camp, Stefan met an old man named Jerzy, who noticed him touching the pocket where the drawing was kept. "A girl?" Jerzy asked. "A promise," Stefan answered. "Same thing," Jerzy said with a sad smile. He told his own story, his wife he hadn't seen in 3 years, his children he didn't know were alive or dead. "You have to survive," Jerzy told him. "Promises are the only thing that separates us from animals. What makes us human?" And when the camp was liberated in April 1945, Stefan weighed 90 kilos. The American soldiers didn't think he'd survive the typhus spreading through the camp, but Stefan kept repeating a date. August 15th. "I have to be in Warsaw by August 15th. He recovered. Slowly, painfully, he gathered his strength, and he began the journey home. Anna's story was darker. She spent 3 years in the Warsaw ghetto, watching it shrink as deportations took people in waves. Her mother and father were taken in 1942. She never saw them again. She survived by working in a factory, by being useful, by making herself invisible. When the ghetto uprising happened in 1943, Anna was smuggled out through the sewers by resistance fighters. She spent the rest of the war in an apartment owned by a Polish couple who risked their lives to hide her. She couldn't go outside. For 2 years, she lived in a hidden room behind a bookcase, where the only window looked out at a brick wall, where silence meant survival. The couple, Pani and Pan Wisniewski, treated her like a daughter. Pani Wisniewski would sit with her in the evenings, teaching her to knit, telling her stories, reminding her that the world still existed beyond the walls. "Is there someone waiting for you?" Pani Wisniewski asked one night. "Someone who will make life worth living when this is over?" Anna pulled out Stefan's drawing. now so worn it was barely visible. "A boy who draws," she said. "We promised to find each other. Then you will," Pani Wisniewski said with certainty. "Love doesn't die just because the world has gone mad." When Warsaw was liberated in January 1945, Anna emerged from her hiding place into a city that no longer existed. 85% of Warsaw had been destroyed. The old town was rubble. The streets she knew were unrecognizable. But the Saxon garden, she learned, still existed. It was damaged but not destroyed. The bench was gone, but the location remained. Stefan reached Warsaw on August 10th, 1945. He stood at the edge of where his neighborhood used to be and wept. Nothing was left. The cafe was gone. The family home was gone. The university was a shell. But the Saxon garden was still there, recognizable with its remaining trees and damaged fountain. He spent 5 days preparing. He begged, borrowed, and bartered for decent clothes. He found soap and shaved. He wanted to look like the boy Anna had known, not the ghost the camps had made him. He found a florist, one of the few who had returned to the city, and arranged to buy roses, the kind that bloomed on the day they'd made their promise. Anna reached Warsaw on August 12th. She'd been staying with the Wisniewskis in a village outside the city, recovering from her years in hiding. The journey was difficult. Transportation was chaotic. Refugees filled every route. But she made it. She too wanted to look right for Stefan. Pani Wisniewski had given her a dress, blue like the one she'd worn the day they met. Anna braided her hair the way she used to. She practiced smiling in the mirror, trying to look like someone who hadn't spent 2 years in silence and fear. This is where fate became cruel. Stefan arrived at the Saxon garden at 8 a.m. He stood where the bench had been. The garden was still damaged from the war, but people were beginning to return, to clear the paths, to plant new flowers among the ruins. He held his roses and waited. Anna was delayed. The tram system was still erratic, and the tram she needed broke down. She had to walk the last 2 miles. She reached the Saxon garden at 10 a.m. But what neither of them knew was this. The garden was large, and in 1938, they had actually used 3 different benches in that area. Stefan remembered it being by the Western Fountain. Anna remembered it being by the Eastern Rose Gardens. They were both right. They had sat in both places, but each had latched onto a different memory as the right spot. Stefan waited by the Western Fountain. Anna searched by the Eastern Roses. At 10:30, Stefan decided to walk around the garden. Maybe Anna didn't remember the exact spot. He moved eastward. At 10:35, Anna decided the bench must have been more to the west than she remembered. She moved westward. Separated by a fence and a group of returning refugees, they passed within 50 feet of each other. At 11 a.m., Stefan returned to his original spot, thinking he might have missed her while walking around. At 11 a.m., Anna was on the other side of the garden, asking an elderly gardener if he remembered where the benches used to be. The gardener, confused by the war and the changes, pointed her in the wrong direction. This continued all day. By noon, they were both exhausted and bewildered. Stefan sat on a pile of rubble that had once been a decorative wall, his roses wilting in the August heat. He watched every woman who entered the garden, searching for Anna's face, her walk, something familiar. But 6 years of war changes people. He'd seen his own reflection, thin, aged, no longer who he used to be. What if Anna walked right past him and he couldn't recognize her? Anna was thinking the same thing. She stood by a damaged statue, her hands trembling. What if Stefan had changed so much she wouldn't recognize him? What if the boy she remembered was gone, replaced by someone the war had turned into a stranger? She'd seen other survivors, how trauma had rewritten their faces. At 1 p.m., a well-meaning woman approached Stefan. Her name was Christina, and she was setting up a temporary aid station in the garden, helping returning refugees find information about missing family members. "Are you looking for someone?" she asked gently, seeing the desperation in the way he scanned faces. "A girl," Stefan said. "We were supposed to meet here today. We made a promise 6 years ago. Christina's face softened with compassion. You have to understand, this was a common tragedy. Thousands of people had made promises before the war, and most would never be kept. What's her name? I'm keeping a list, trying to help people reconnect. Anna Kowalski, Stefan said. Then he hesitated. Or Anna Cohn. She might be using her real name now. Christina wrote it down. I'll ask around. Come back tomorrow. Sometimes it takes people a while to find their way here. Meanwhile, on the other side of the garden, Anna was having almost the same conversation with a Red Cross volunteer named Tomasz. Stefan Nowak, Anna said, her voice breaking. An architect, or he was studying architecture. Dark hair, and his hands were always covered in charcoal from his drawings. Tomasz wrote it down. I'll check our lists. We're coordinating with all the relief organizations. If he's alive and in Warsaw, we'll find him. Here's the tragedy. Christina and Tomasz were from different organizations. They would eventually share their lists, but not immediately. Not that day. At 3 p.m., the rain started. Not a gentle summer rain, but one of those sudden, violent storms Warsaw is famous for. The few people in the garden scattered for shelter. Stefan took cover to the east, under the remains of a pavilion. Anna ran west, hiding in a half-collapsed gazebo. Now, they were exactly where the other had started that morning. Stefan stood at Anna's morning spot, rain streaming down his face, still holding his ruined roses. He thought about giving up. Maybe she hadn't survived. Maybe she had survived but moved on, found someone else, built a new life. Maybe she'd forgotten or decided keeping the promise was too painful. But then he remembered Jersey from the camp, the old man who said promises were what made them human. He'd made a promise. He would keep it, even if Anna never came. Anna was having similar thoughts in the gazebo. Rain was beating on the broken roof, and she wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the August heat. She thought about Stefan's drawings, the way he'd looked at her like she was something precious. She thought about how that bench in the garden was the last place she'd felt truly safe, truly loved, before the world ended. She would wait. Even if he never came, she would wait until sunset. Because that's what you did when you made a promise. The rain stopped around 4 p.m. Stefan, soaked and shivering, decided to make one final systematic search. He would walk every path in the garden, check every corner. If Anna was here, he would find her. He started from the eastern pavilion where he'd taken shelter, moving in a grid pattern westward. Anna emerged from the gazebo at the same moment, adopting the same strategy. She would search every inch of this garden. She started from the western side, moving eastward. They were walking toward each other on parallel paths, separated by about 30 feet and damaged fencing. An elderly couple was walking between them. Slowly, the woman leaning on her husband's arm. They too had survived. You could tell from their clothes, from the way they moved, like people who had learned not to hope for too much. Stefan heard the woman say to her husband, "Do you remember when we used to come here? Before the war? When we were young?" The husband replied, "We're still here. Kochanie, that's what matters. We survived together." Stefan felt like he'd been stabbed, surviving together. That's what he'd wanted with Anna. To survive together, to face the war together, to rebuild together. Instead, they'd been separated. And now he was searching for her ghost in a ruined garden. He didn't know that Anna was standing on the other side of the fence, tears streaming down her face, hearing the same conversation, thinking the same thing. They stood there, separated by fencing and 30 feet, both crying, both thinking they'd lost everything. Then Stefan moved forward, continuing his grid search westward, and Anna moved forward, continuing her grid search eastward. They missed each other by seconds. By 6 p.m., Stefan had searched the entire garden 3 times. He'd asked every person he encountered if they'd seen Anna. He described her: dark hair, braided, eyes like libraries, maybe a blue dress. But 6 years had passed. Who could recognize anyone from a description like that? By the western fountain, At his original spot, he sat down on the ground, completely defeated. The roses were gone, trampled during his frantic search. He pulled out the drawing, now so worn it was barely recognizable, and looked at the girl he'd drawn 7 years ago. "I kept my promise. Anna," he whispered to the picture. "I came. I waited. I'm here." At the same moment, Anna was on the eastern side, sitting against a tree, exhaustion overwhelming her. She'd asked dozens of people if they'd seen Stefan. She described him tall, dark-haired, artist's hands, probably carrying drawings, but her descriptions were met with blank looks or pitying glances. She pulled out Stefan's drawing of the bench and traced the X he'd marked with her finger. "I kept my promise. Stefan," she said to the empty air, "I came back. Where are you?" Here's where things become even more cruel. Remember Christina and Tomasz, the aid workers who took their information? At 6:30 p.m., their organizations held a coordination meeting in a building near the garden. They were comparing lists of people searching for loved ones. Christina saw Stefan Novak on Tomasz's list. Tomasz saw Anna Kowalski-Kohn on Christina's list. "Wait," Christina said, her heart racing. "I talked to Stefan Novak today. He's looking for Anna Kowalski. He's in the garden right now. I talked to Anna this morning," Tomasz said, jumping up. "She's looking for Stefan Novak." They ran from the building toward the Saxon garden. It was 6:45 p.m. The sun was beginning to set. At 7 p.m., Stefan made a decision. He would leave. Not forever. He'd come back tomorrow, the next day, the day after. But for today, he had to accept that Anna hadn't come. Maybe she was delayed. Maybe she'd try again tomorrow. He couldn't spend the whole night in the garden. He stood up, brushed off his wet clothes. He took one last long look, memorizing every corner, every tree, every remaining landmark. Then he turned and began walking toward the garden's northern exit. At exactly the same moment, Anna made the same decision. She couldn't stay all night. She had nowhere to sleep in Warsaw. She'd planned to stay with relief organizations if she found Stefan, to return to the Wisniewskis if she didn't. The return journey would take hours, and it was already getting dark. She stood up, took one last look at the garden. Then she turned and began walking toward the southern exit. They were leaving from opposite sides of the garden at the exact same time. Christina and Tomasz burst into the garden at 7:05 p.m., out of breath from running. They split up, Christina heading north where she'd last seen Stefan, Tomasz heading south where he'd last seen Anna. Christina reached the northern section at 7:08 p.m. Stefan had left at 7:02. She searched frantically, asking everyone if they'd seen a tall man with dark hair. An elderly woman pointed north. "A young man just left. That way, maybe 5 minutes ago." Tomasz reached the southern section at 7:09 p.m. Anna had left at 7:03. He asked everyone about a woman in a blue dress. Someone pointed south. She just left, walking toward the river. Christina ran north, trying to catch Stefan. Tomasz ran south, trying to catch Anna. At 7:15 p.m., Christina saw a tall figure in the distance. She ran faster, calling out, "Stefan! Stefan Novak!" The man turned. It wasn't Stefan, just another survivor with a similar build. "I'm sorry," he said, seeing her desperate face. "Are you looking for someone?" Christina bent over, trying to breathe, tears of disappointment streaming down her face. She'd lost him. At the same moment, Tomasz saw a woman in blue clothing by the riverbank. "Anna," he called out. "Anna Kowalski." The woman turned. It wasn't Anna. She was older, with short hair. "No, I'm sorry," she said, seeing his distress. Tomasz had lost her too. Stefan walked through the ruins of Warsaw in the fading light, feeling more lost than he'd felt even in the camps. At least in the camps, he'd had hope. He'd had a promise to hold on to. Now he'd kept his promise, and it hadn't been enough. He found shelter in a partially destroyed building where other returning refugees were gathering. They shared food, thin soup and hard bread, and stories. Everyone was looking for someone. Wives searching for husbands, children searching for parents, friends searching for friends. An old man asked Stefan his story. Stefan told him about Anna, about the promise, about searching the garden all day. "Will you come back tomorrow?" the man asked. "Yes," Stefan said immediately. "Every day, until I find her or know for certain she's gone." Anna spent a similar night. She'd missed the last reliable transport back to the village, so she stayed with a family the Red Cross connected her with. Strangers who took in refugees, giving them floor space and thin blankets. The woman of the house, seeing Anna's tears, asked what was wrong. Anna told her about Stefan, about the promise, about the empty garden. "Maybe he came on the wrong day," the woman suggested gently. "Maybe he'll come tomorrow. Maybe." Anna said, not believing it, "I'll go back tomorrow. And the day after, I have to." Stefan returned to the Saxon garden at dawn. He'd barely slept. He took his position by the western fountain, determined to wait all day if necessary. Anna arrived at 8 a.m., returning to the eastern rose gardens. This time she'd brought food, prepared for a long wait. And here's something you need to understand about Warsaw in August 1945. The city was chaos. Thousands of people were returning every day, searching for family, searching for homes, searching for any piece of their old lives. The Saxon garden had become a central meeting point, and on August 16th, it was crowded. Relief organizations had set up tables. The Red Cross was registering refugees. The new government was trying to take a census. There were probably 200 people in the garden that morning. Stefan searched, but the crowd made it almost impossible. He pushed through groups of people, scanning faces, only to lose his bearings and have to start over. The garden that had seemed empty the day before was now packed. Anna had the same problem. She'd see someone in the distance who could be Stefan, but by the time she made her way through the crowd, they'd moved. She'd stand on tiptoe, but there were too many people, too much movement. At 10 a.m., they were actually in the same line, Stefan 5 people behind Anna, waiting to check the Red Cross's published list of registered survivors. Stefan was looking at the back of Anna's head, at her dark braided hair, but he'd seen 3 other women with similar hair that morning, and each time it had been a stranger. He was starting to be afraid to hope. Anna reached the list first. She ran her finger down the names, looking for Nowak. Stefan? There were 2 Stefan Nowaks on the list, but neither had the right birth date or description. Her heart sank. When Stefan reached the list, she had stepped aside. He searched for Kowalski, Anna, or Cohn, Anna. There were several Annas, but none matched. He felt like he was drowning. They stood 5 feet apart, both looking at the same list, both devastated. Then a surge in the crowd pushed Anna away, swept along by a group of people rushing to a newly opened aid station. Stefan was pushed in the opposite direction by another group. This continued for 3 days. Stefan came every morning and stayed until evening. Anna did the same. They were always there, always searching, always missing each other because of crowds, wrong turns, cruel timing. On August 18th, Stefan was talking to Christina, the aid worker who'd been frantically trying to find him. "I've been here every day since the 15th, he told her. "All day, every day. When do you usually leave?" Christina asked. "Around 7 p.m., Stefan said. "When it gets dark." Christina's heart sank. She'd been coming to the garden every evening after her shift, around 7:30, to search for him. "Come earlier tomorrow," Stefan said. "Maybe you'll have news." That same day, Anna was talking to Tomasz. "I've been here every day since the 15th, she said, her voice hoarse from exhaustion and crying. "Morning to evening. When do you arrive?" Tomasz asked. "Around 8 a.m., Anna said. Tomasz felt his stomach turn. He'd been coming at 7 a.m. before his shift to search for her. "I'll be here at 7:30 tomorrow," he promised. "Maybe I'll have found him." On August 19th, Stefan made a decision. He couldn't stay in Warsaw any longer. He had no home here, no family, no way to support himself. He'd heard there was reconstruction work in Krakow, that the new government was trying to rebuild the country. If he didn't find Anna today, he would need to leave, find work, build some kind of life. He could come back. He would come back every August 15th for the rest of his life, if necessary. But he couldn't camp in a ruined garden forever. Anna was thinking the same thing. The Wisniewskis had been generous, but she couldn't stay with them forever. She'd heard there were jobs for women in the new administration, opportunities in which, if Stefan wasn't here, she needed to start over somewhere. They both came early on the 19th, at dawn, determined to make one final all-day search. At 6:30 a.m., the garden was nearly empty. Just a few early risers, a few homeless refugees sleeping on the ground. Stefan walked the entire garden slowly, methodically. At 6:45, he reached the eastern rose gardens. Anna was in the western section, by the fountain, doing her own methodical search. At 6:47, she reached the fountain. At 7 a.m., they switched again. Stefan went west. Anna went east. This dance continued until noon. At 1 p.m., something extraordinary happened. A photographer from an American newspaper was in the garden, documenting the ruins of Warsaw for a story about post-war Europe. He was setting up to photograph the damaged fountain, wanting to capture the contrast between destruction and the people trying to rebuild. "Excuse me," he said to Stefan in broken Polish, who was standing by the fountain. "Could you move? You're in my shot." Stefan stepped aside, moving about 20 feet east. The photographer adjusted his camera, then realized he actually wanted a person in the shot, to show scale and human resilience. "Actually, sir, could you stand right there?" He pointed to a spot near the fountain. Stefan moved to where he indicated. The photographer took his picture. That photograph would later be published in Life magazine, without Stefan's name. Just the caption, "Survivor searching for lost loved ones in Warsaw's Saxon garden, August 1945. What the photographer didn't know, what Stefan didn't know, was that Anna was standing 30 feet away. Behind him, her view blocked by the camera equipment and a small crowd of onlookers who'd gathered to watch the American photographer work. She waited for the crowd to disperse. When it did, Stefan had moved on, continuing his search. At 6 p.m. on August 19th, Stefan sat down one last time by the western fountain. He'd been there for 5 days. He'd searched every corner, asked hundreds of people, checked every list. Anna wasn't coming. Either she'd tried to come, but couldn't make it, or she'd come on the wrong day, or this thought made his chest collapse. She hadn't survived after all, and he was searching for a ghost. He pulled out her drawing one last time. "I tried. Anna," he whispered. "God knows I tried. I'll come back next year. August 15th, 1946. I'll be here. I promise I'll be here." He stood up and walked toward the exit. At 6:05 p.m., Anna was sitting under a tree on the eastern side, crying so hard she couldn't breathe. 5 days. She'd given it 5 days. Stefan wasn't coming. Maybe he'd died in the camps. Maybe he'd been killed in the uprising. Maybe, and this thought was almost worse, he'd survived but forgotten her, or decided keeping the promise was too painful, or found someone else. She looked at Stefan's drawing of the bench, at the X he'd marked. "I came back," she told it. "I kept my promise. Where were you?" She stood up and walked toward the exit. For the next 40 years, both Stefan and Anna would return to the Saxon garden every August 15th. Stefan found work in Krakow, became an architect, helped rebuild churches and schools. He never married. "I'm already married," he would tell friends who tried to set him up with someone. "I made a promise." Every August 15th, he would travel to Warsaw and spend the entire day in the Saxon garden, scanning faces, hoping. Anna found work in Łódź, became a librarian, surrounded herself with the books she'd always loved. She never married either. "I'm waiting for someone," she would tell concerned friends. He promised to meet me. Every August 15th, she would travel to Warsaw and spend the entire day waiting in the Saxon garden. For 40 years, they were there, together but apart. In 1985, Stefan was 77 years old. His health was failing, and he knew this was probably his last trip to Warsaw. On August 15th, 1985, he sat in the Saxon garden, an old man with white hair and trembling hands, still holding roses, still keeping his promise. Anna was 75. She'd had a minor stroke the year before, and her doctors had warned her not to travel. But she came anyway, leaning heavily on a cane, determined to keep her promise one last time. Here's how the truth was finally discovered. In 1985, a documentary filmmaker named Marek Wojciechowski was making a film about the reconstruction of Warsaw. He was interviewing elderly survivors, collecting stories about the war and its aftermath. While filming in the Saxon garden in August, he noticed an old man sitting alone, holding flowers, clearly waiting for someone. Something about the man's posture, a mixture of hope and sorrow, moved Marek deeply. "Excuse me, sir," Marek said, approaching with his camera. "I'm making a documentary about survivors. Would you tell me your story?" Stefan looked at the camera, then at the young director. Why not? What did he have to lose? He told his story. About Anna, about the promise, about coming back every year for 40 years, about searching the garden on that first August 15th in 1945, about always believing she'd be there next time. Marek was deeply moved. "This is incredible," he said. "Would it be okay if I use this in my film?" "Use it," Stefan said. "Maybe someone who sees it will remember seeing her. Maybe I'll finally learn what happened to her." 2 weeks later, Marek was in a library in Łódź, researching another interview subject. The librarian helping him was an elderly woman named Anna. She moved slowly, and Marek noticed a small, very old drawing pinned to her desk, a sketch of a bench in a garden with an X marked on it. "That's a beautiful drawing," Marek said, making conversation. Anna's eyes filled with tears. "My fiancé drew it, before the war. We promised to meet at that bench after the war ended. I waited for him. He never came." Marek felt electrified. "Wait, what's your name?" "Anna Kowalski, or Cohn, my real name. I used Kowalski during the war." "Did you go to the Saxon garden?" Marek interrupted, his heart racing. August 15th, 1945. Anna looked at him. "Yes, I was there. How could you?" "He was there too," Marek said, pulling out his notebook where he'd written Stefan's story. "Stefan Nowak. He was there. He goes back every year. He thought you never came." Marek arranged their meeting. Not in the Saxon garden. That would feel too cruel, too loaded with history. Instead, he rented a small cafe in Warsaw with large windows and morning light. On September 3rd, 1985, Stefan sat at a table, his hands shaking so badly he had to put down his coffee cup. Marek had shown him a photograph of Anna, an old woman now, white-haired, using a cane, but he'd recognized her eyes immediately, eyes like libraries. Anna arrived, supported by Marek. She saw Stefan and stopped in the doorway. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. It had been 46 years since they'd last met. They were old now, marked by time, trauma, and loss. But Anna saw the boy who'd drawn her picture with charcoal-stained hands, and Stefan saw the girl who'd stood on a bench shouting at politicians, full of passion. "You came," Anna said, her voice breaking. "I was always there," Stefan replied. "Every year, I never stopped looking for you." "I was there too," Anna said, tears streaming down her face. "I looked for you. I waited." They sat together, and Marek watched as they pieced together what had happened. The different benches they remembered, the timing, the crowds, the near misses that had kept them apart, while they both desperately searched for each other. "We were there together," Anna said in wonder, All those years, keeping the same promise in the same place, just on different schedules. Stefan said, and despite everything, he laughed. 40 years. Anna, we were both so stubborn. I learned from the best. Anna said, taking his hand. His hands were still beautiful, she thought, even wrinkled and age-spotted now. Still, the hands that had drawn her picture. Stefan and Anna spent the last 4 years of their lives together. They married in December 1985, a small ceremony with Marek as witness. It wasn't the life they'd imagined at 19 and 21, the house with perfect windows, the children they'd wanted, the decades they should have had together. But it was something. It was promises finally kept. It was proof that love could survive 6 years of war and 40 years of searching. It was enough. Stefan died in 1988, holding Anna's hand. Anna died in 1989. 6 months later, they were buried together in Warsaw, near the Saxon garden. Their headstone reads, "They kept their promises." Marek's documentary telling their story won awards and was shown worldwide. People watching it wept. People wondered how two people could be so close, yet so far, for so long. But people who had truly loved someone, who had made promises they were willing to die for, understood. Sometimes fate is cruel. Sometimes timing is everything. Sometimes you do everything right and still lose. But Stefan and Anna found each other in the end. Not the way they'd planned, not when they'd planned, but they found each other. Maybe that's what making a promise is like. Not going just once, going every year, even when it seems ridiculous. Even when everyone says forget it, move on with your life. Even when you're 77 years old, when your hands shake, when you think this might be the last time. You go anyway because you made a promise. Because the person you made it to is that important. A promise is what separates us from being animals. A promise is what we keep because we're human. If you've made a promise to someone you love, keep it. Keep it no matter what. Let them say, it's impossible. Keep it anyway. Let years pass. Keep it. Let them say they've forgotten. They've moved on. They've changed. You keep it anyway because you don't know. Maybe they're keeping it too. Maybe they're waiting too. Maybe they're going every year too. And maybe without you realizing it, they've been waiting for you 3 streets away all along. This story taught me this. Love isn't enough. Making a promise isn't enough. Even being there isn't enough. Sometimes fate puts you just 3 streets away from the person you love and still never lets you meet for a lifetime. Being close doesn't always mean not being far apart. Think about these words for a moment. I love you all very much. Rest assured that the upcoming content will be emotional, meaningful, and as you know, with surprising endings. Take care.